early game side of things, Bankyugi has not found the room for the Raise Dead Sethek and Wandmaker package, which is what GivePLZ is running.
Which is where things, again, could get weird, because the Cthulhu is the ultimate win condition in a way for Bankyugi, but there's two major things that can go wrong. One, he may not get there, just straight up, the game may be over too quickly. And secondly, Miner and Alusha, you steal one of those pieces and the entire strategy falls apart. And so I do think that because he is lacking that same punch in the mid to late game that GivePLZ will, again, the only dragon that Bankyugi is running is Malagos, which draws you a lot of cards, but it's not a threat in its own right in the way that Ysera, Alexstrasza, and Onyxia are. And so I think if he can get to the point with Cthulhu, obviously he's in a good spot, but I have my doubts as to whether he will be able to even get there in the first place.
Very real concerns to be had, but I am liking Bankyugi's opening hand. He has Thrive in the Shadow to pull him spot removal if he needs it, Palm Reading to corrupt the insight, and also just make his hand very cheap, and most importantly perhaps the Ogremancer, which is one way for him to check the board presence that he's not running in the early game.
Well, two pieces of Cthulhu right out the gate. You know, usually we think of Cthulhu as a card that you have to draw your entire deck for it to work. That's not necessarily the case. Like, you can get it nice and early, especially if you get an insight to rip it from your deck once you've played all the spells.
Certainly can be very powerful in this matchup. Alusha with Cthulhu also has done some pretty insane things over in top 5 moments, if I recall. But GivePLZ already getting some fire off of his Scorpid. It feels like they're just a package deal. Venomous Scorpid, Raise Dead.
Both players getting some pretty spicy starting hands here. Obviously with insights aplenty. They're going to be drawing their powerful cards from their deck very consistently. But I think that works out in advantage of GivePLZ a little bit more with double Raise Dead and a Scorpid in the pool at the start. It's so gorgeous way to just make sure nothing sticks for Bankyugi in the mid game.
Oh, all the Raise Deads.
Oh my god.
He is just the Night King right now, GivePLZ. And he gets the insight corrupted and spends all the mana really nicely. Looks good for GivePLZ, but Bankyugi can, across 2 turns, potentially set up an empty board Ogremancer, which is also quite powerful.
Like, do you just go Eye of Cthulhu here? It's obviously not a guaranteed clear by any means, but it's a decent play onto the board. It kills it most of the time and sets up for that Ogremancer once again.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to get a good setup for Eye of Cthulhu in this matchup. You can't really expect it to clear more than 1 minion because priest minions are shaped in such a way that they have more health than attack. So using it as a spot removal here and getting the expensive mana out of the way rather than Holy Smite, I think was a great decision from Bankyugi. And now he can go Ogremancer with Coin Smite if he so chooses. I think it's worth using the coin to isolate the Ogre on the board.
Yeah, I agree. Like, we obviously at all points need to factor in that Bankyugi is playing a somewhat different game plan to what we would expect in the Priest Mirror overall. Again, much lower on value, trying to draw through his deck and get the Cthulhu active as soon as possible. I did still think that it was going to be the Ogremancer plus the Holy Smite to get something on the board, but I guess his overall game plan is just incredibly reliant on that Cthulhu once again, so he's making sure that the spells are always just played out of his hand instantly.
In a way, this is aggressively trying to get the Cthulhu done as soon as possible, but in a way, it's also very slow onto the board because he gives GivePLZ an entire full turn of initiative. My first instinct is to disagree with this, but of course, we have to see how it plays out. Bankyugi doesn't quite have the other pieces of Cthulhu yet, but he is running to Thrive in the Shadow to give him more consistent cycle to get there. And here is the swarm of Scorpids again. It's the 8th plague. Oh.
And what, 10 cards? He does have to dump something from the hand here at the very least.
Might be Apotheosis.
Looking that way. Yeah, Brightwing doesn't actually clear anything out.
Certainly not a matchup where Apotheosis is crucial to hold on to. It's always nice to have it in your back pocket with Samuro, but a lot of the time I find it's more effective to just set up more health on a single minion and try to stick the board that way.
Man, I really wonder if Bankyugi is just going to play this like full combo style where Obviously, the thing that can go wrong at any point is, number one, overdrawing pieces, which you want to be careful about with Malagos, but Elusha is the main thing. He doesn't want to leave any cards in, any Cthulhu pieces in hand, that can be Elusha'd away and then played. Because now with Malagos in hand, which he was reasonably likely to find, he's only running like 4 or 5 minions in the deck overall. After that, he is pretty likely to find Cthulhu off the Insight if he can get the pieces. Like, he's just going for a turbo Cthulhu in this matchup, I think, which... It's playing to the strengths of his deck. I think he is overall unfavored in the matchup unless he's able to get that particular strength to work for him.
Sure, but even if you're doing that, the rest of the turn could have been 2 more cycle cards, but he ended up just floating 3 mana, and that honestly baffles me at the moment.
Right.
Like, the Insight was already corrupted, if I'm not mistaken, and the Thrive in the Shadow could have drawn him something to just get deeper in the deck.
I mean, again, I think it's about... Again, you can disagree with this, obviously, but making sure that when he plays Thrive to get a Cthulhu piece, he plays it straight away. He does not have it floating in hand for any length of time.
That's fair. In the end, he is the first to pick up Elusha, and this Hysteria was not the ideal outcome for Bankyugi. Of course, he wanted it to first hit the Amalgam and then clear the other one, because Ogremancer empty board, infinitely more powerful than Ogremancer having to face down a minion that could possibly VT it. But still, again, based on the way he's been playing the previous turns, it feels like Bankyugi, him getting a board is very much an afterthought.
He can only play that way for so long, though, because his removal options are actually quite severely limited here, with only a discovered Soul Mirror to really impact this board on the other side.
True. He did discover Ysera as well, but the Awakens takes a while to get going. Maybe you don't care. It's more about the hand space that he can't actually get all of the Ysera cards at the moment, but maybe he doesn't care so much about taking 7 as long as he gets to clear at some point.
So you can definitely think about Elusha at this point. It's close, because if you play Elusha and your opponent goes Thrive into Cthulhu piece, then things start to go very wrong. But once he's played that, he could definitely think about just going Coin Elusha and trying to use some of the opponent's removal pieces, like, obviously Hysteria most likely, but maybe a Zarella clear or a Samuro clear as well.
I think it makes sense to go for Thrive here. If you hit Hysteria, it's just a guaranteed full clear. Very nice for Bankyugi. And if he didn't, then Holy Nova at the end of that turn still would have cleared up most of it, just left the Ogremancer, and then he could try and follow up with Soul Mirror or Holy Smite the next turn. So if GivePLZ wants, it's even more Scorpions, very likely. Sometimes you get better stuff like Ogremancer. A lot of the time you got 2/2s as well.
Yeah, like, to me, he just wants to clear stuff out of his hand, right? Because Ysera offers the real impactful plays, like getting the Dreaming Drake down. Ysera itself is a very real threat. So he just wants to clear out cards as quick as he can from his hand, which, I mean, this kind of accomplished it. At least puts more threats on the board.
Yeah, he got the Ogremancer. That is a good deal. I think whiffing on 1 and not hitting a Scorpion, at if that's the expense for guaranteed getting Ogremancer, I think that's perfectly worth it. It took quite a lot out of Bankyugi to get rid of the Ogremancer over 2 turns.
So now I think we can look a lot more heavily at Mind Render Elusha on this turn. There is little, I would say, that can be done to really disrupt your hand. Like, they can obviously just play out all your cards, but they can't destroy your combo, I don't think, in the Cthulhu very easily at all.
It's only if they top deck exactly one of the pieces on that one draw.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, maybe even that small failure rate is not worth it for Bankyugi to risk it. Clearly, the way he's played this, where he feels okay floating 7 mana as long as his combo guarantee stays intact, means that he's all in on just winning with Cthulhu here. And it is already telling us a lot about how the matchup works, at least from Yugi's perspective. But GivePLZ is starting to turn on the gas here. If he gets anything that buffs attack, Bankyugi will have to blink. Oh, Psyche Split? Oh.
That is more like it. This.
Now it has 4 heads, Derek.
Yeah, just do this every game, 4 heads. It's easy. And now things start getting very, very tricky, of course, for Bankyugi. We're looking at any kind of a board clear. Soul Mirror does some of that, but not quite enough. Shadow Word Ruin. Sorry, buddy, not quite.
Nope. I mean, the big deal here is he gets the Sethek off the mirror, and then he can use these Smites and Renews for, I don't even know how much, or even the way to sequence it, because every spell will then just refill a bunch of these 2/2s on the other side. But surely he has to clear the Sethek, right?
I mean, he can end with Coin Nova, so...
Oh, true.
Just works out pretty clean for him. It's a very nice turn, actually.
Yeah, I didn't spot that. That's perfect. It only leaves 2-1 on the other side, the one that got focus willed. That is huge for Yugi. And that means that GivePLZ is likely... he doesn't even have enough damage to heal back up and get a Zyrella off of it. So it's Hysteria, probably.
Yeah, sorry, my client is...
Mine too. Mine too.
Slowing down a little bit.
Imagining what happened.
But yeah, the Holy Nova to close things out. Very nice turn by Bankyugi. That is the swing turn he was looking for, and my goodness, was that powerful.
And this silence thing has maximum 5 health,
5.
if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So he can heal that for 4, his opponent for 3, or for 4 as well, I guess, with the hero power. And like, there is a Zyrella clear on this turn.
What I'm looking for as well, but it maybe just uses too much resources, so in the end GivePLZ is just going to Hysteria on the biggest ogre. This could go wrong in a lot of ways, like namely the Sethek not dying. But died. Okay.
Okay,
That's
one
decent.
Ogremancer survives, but yeah.
2 head.
You have to be happy with that overall for GivePLZ.
So if Bankyugi had one more card in hand here, I would also be heavily looking at just Ysera and Dream and try to overdraw them at a spot where it's also just good to clear the board. Of course, Bankyugi has diligently stayed at 8 cards from this point, so I wonder if he's aware of that possible big punish if he does overdraw a Cthulhu piece.
So now Bankyugi has Samuro and Zyrella and Oozes in his list in terms of minions in his deck, because the thing that is really intriguing me is the 0 mana Insight in hand in order to try and draw the Cthulhu from his deck as soon as it is put in there. You can't go for a true OTK, obviously, because the parts all cost 5, but you can at least draw it from your deck so that your opponent can't, like, Elusha into draw it or any kind of nonsense like that.
If he's starting with Prayer, it signals to me he's looking at an Elusha turn. I am looking at, like, say, Power Infusion Psyche splits, which, obviously you can't clear the Alex right away, but it seemed like a good enough board presence to me. Oh, okay, so he started with the Prayer to make more room for Ysera instead. Okay, get behind that. The Alex, while it is a powerful battle cry, is very slow in this spot.
Oh man, it is refreshing, because I feel like even the control decks nowadays, they don't have like a strong one-purpose game plan that they're working towards. Like Priest just kind of removes stuff, plays stuff, and eventually gets there. But it's nice to cast a matchup with like one overarching theme here from Bankyugi, which is, you know, play for that combo.
And again, GivePLZ has this window now to try and burn a piece if he really wants to. It is not overall likely 2 pieces out of 15 cards, but who knows the next time Bankyugi will be on 9 cards, and the next time the board will be in this shape where Ysera Dream actually looks like a good tempo play as well. The alternative, I believe, would just be Alex again, because Zyrella, there's just not enough to heal for it to work here.
Yeah, it does look like we're experiencing a slight spectator issue, or maybe just a disconnect from one of the players. Shouldn't be a problem. Again, it's usually very easy to reconnect and make sure that nothing is lost in the process due to the pause feature. But it was a critical moment, absolutely, there for GivePLZ. He was starting to struggle with clearing the board there, and even though he's not afraid of losing to board pressure from his opponent. Every turn he's not ahead on board and hitting Bankyugi in the face is another turn that he's closer to getting the Cthulhu and locking out the game that way. So it's a ticking time bomb here for GivePLZ before he's able to get on the board and start winning through tempo.
True. And in terms of his best tempo options, the dragons are just it. So Alexstrasza has to be on the mind. However, if you play it and leave minions up on the other side, a single apotheosis could undo all of that work. So from my perspective, what GivePLZ has needed this entire late game is just a big, clean Xyrella swing, which you were talking about on the Ogremaster board turn was a possibility, but maybe was a bit too difficult to piece together with the time he had.
What is a loon's will?
You turn to GivePLZ, who appears to be starting off with Flash Heal. Sorry, my client just froze again.
Yeah, indeed. It's like the real question for me here for GivePLZ is just, do you need to do anything at all at this instance? Because again, I said you want to get back on the board as soon as possible. But the problem really is that he could save up for a big Xyrella clear instead with the Flash Heal and the Renew. Instead, he's just going all in on trying to clear right now, clearing a bunch of room in hand, burning a card from Bankyugi, which is Xyrella, not too impactful, as he is breathing a sigh of relief there. As you can see, that was a big deal.
True. For GivePLZ, even though the turn looked like it was a lot of resources used, he actually accomplished both the things I was suggesting on the previous turn, which is swing board and end up with a minion where they have nothing. So then you can start actually threatening pressure and go for the possible overdraw. I'm not sure if he was, ideally supposed to do both, but this is the big push that signals that GivePLZ does not feel favored in the long game. He is trying to mess with Bankyugi's game plan should he not find the Elucia. And Bankyugi here gets the guaranteed one spell that was not guaranteed to be a piece of Cthulhu. So I'm not actually sure if he's happy about that because now Elucia might be scary.
Yeah, another slight tech issue here as we are trying to work our way through. Maybe that's it fixed there instead, and we might have to go back to Cam. But that's a big deal that the piece of Cthulhu was found there for Bankyugi, because it gives that one turn of Elucia possibilities to GivePLZ on the other side. He doesn't have it, but again, for Bankyugi, it starts to raise questions about what his overall strategy is, because what if he did just draw a piece of Cthulhu there, which he did? What's the game plan? Just leave it up for a turn? That's been inconsistent with the way he has played it thus far, for sure.
Certainly feels that way. It could be that he was also just playing the odds there because Malygos one spell drawn, it's almost certainly going to get you not a piece of Cthulhu. So that was his actual only card draw in hand that kept him cycling closer to his game plan, I believe, because all the other cards in hand seemed to be removal or just stuff that didn't really get him ahead on board. It's really tough viewing this priest deck like a combo deck because I'm just not used to seeing it played out that way, but Bankyugi clearly has a strong opinion on that being the way that the matchup is supposed to be played. So it really now raises the question of how much GivePLZ is looking for his Elucia. Is he going to start taking every aggressive draw ability he can discover from this point on as well? Because that seems like it's where it's headed.
You definitely imagine so. Jumping back in. I am now looking a little more closely at Apo plus Shadowword Ruin on the Malygos here, just because he has something on board now. Like, the benefit of sticking a Ysera here is pretty big, I would argue.
True. We could also see something like Apo Hysteria. I believe if you Apo your own, it had to happen before playing the Wand Thief, then it could have ended up as a full clear. However, that's a lot of the, it's your best Samuro activator used. Maybe he didn't quite want to go for that. But clearly now, Bankyugi's priority should be playing this piece of Cthulhu before it could possibly get Elucia'd.
You definitely think so. And I do think he will in the end. Again, this is consistent with his game plan, all in on the Cthulhu. You definitely wanted to go with the psych split there and the power infusion potentially as well, just to go all in on the pressure and try and double down while your opponent can't necessarily clear it. But I guess you'll just accept in the end that this is good enough for the moment, and you're able to push a lot of damage and clear the entire board as well, actually.
Yep. I think it's a good middle ground for Bankyugi to take, sticks to his game plan, and also doesn't give GivePLZ a chance to push base damage in the meantime. So given that it's quite deep now into the deck, Bankyugi is 3 out of 4 there to get the Cthulhu done. GivePLZ will certainly have a higher priority placed on finding Illucia. Problem is he doesn't really have card draw here. He has Renew to maybe hunt for something, but in the end goes for the removal, doesn't even have the mana to play Alex. That's really scary. So I believe Bankyugi only has 1 minion left in his deck after having drawn... Oh, sorry, he runs double Ooze.
Yeah.
So there is still 1 Ooze and 1 Blade Master Samuro. So if he wants the Insight is just a tutored draw that sometimes is draw nothing. So I'd be interested in taking that. Or he wants to save it entirely to just get Cthulhu the turn after he plays the last piece.
That's definitely what I'm thinking. Yeah. I mean, the other thing that we haven't even talked about at this point is that Cthulhu does not say battle cry win the game. It deals 30 damage to your opponent, which is big. You know, you're likely to win the game if that happens. But if they have minions on board, it is by far from a guaranteed win condition. And at that point, things could start getting a lot closer, actually, which is, again, I think why Bankyugi wants to go as quick as possible. Because once Cthulhu is played, you know, you want to make it so it's less likely that your opponent has a dominant board position that you just cannot hope to chew through.
And Bankyugi stalling a little bit more, just playing down resources that he doesn't deem essential. Easy Hysteria for GivePLZ, but it is really just a waiting game now of can GivePLZ get the Illucia early enough, and if he does get it, will he have the read on whether or not Bankyugi has something that he actually wants to steal? Bankyugi is going to try for the Illucia now, which does have that built-in failure rate of sometimes they top deck my last piece and my Cthulhu is no longer... Wait. It is active because... No, it's not, right?
The Cthulhu piece, yes. One more, yeah.
Yeah. And so that means that Bankyugi was desperate to do something this turn on board. He felt it was too slow to just pass again. Otherwise, he wouldn't give the small possible failure rate to GivePLZ.
Well, it deletes a lot of the healing from the deck, and another big health minion. Like, this is a way that he could potentially have healed up after the Cthulhu, which is obviously a very big deal.
Now you take the worst one, because it goes back to GivePLZ's hand.
Yeah, I mean, I thought death was probably the worst one there. Like, are you really hoping to go for the win that way? Either way. He did hand over the Insight, obviously, to the other side here with this game plan. There's nothing that GivePLZ can get that isn't a Cthulhu piece, given that he drew the Desperate Prayer. Everything, I think, is now just fine for Bankyugi, in terms of the Cthulhu, at least.
Yes. He did lose the Insight, which means that the immediate pull to get Cthulhu with the Insight costing 0. So, like, the immediate guarantee of playing your last piece and the very next turn playing Cthulhu is not available for Bankyugi anymore. Not the end of the world, but in some cases it gives GivePLZ a bit more time to find Illucia.
Just play everything, right? Do you care about playing the skeleton? I can't rather just go like Nightmare, Nova, Desperate Prayer.
Yeah, I think Holy Nova is probably more useful than the skeleton. So he gets rid of it. Doesn't play the Nightmare. I think that's fine. You kind of value your own minion.
Sure. And
you don't want to take 7 from theirs.
Well, at the end of that Illucia ring from Bankyugi's side, he is still safe. Malygos. It was an interesting one. Again, it allows you to draw through your deck, but he doesn't want to do that in one big chunk. If he drew every spell from his deck there, he would just be inviting, again, the Ilusha insta-lose.
It is an insta-lose, but he knew GivePLZ's hand before this turn. So if he didn't top deck Ilusha that turn, that means Bankyugi has the guaranteed last piece into Cthulhu.
Maybe that was it. Maybe that was the window to take it. Like, because again, the crucial thing is Cthulhu does not just win you the game. You have to play it while there's an empty board or your opponent is heavily damaged. And the longer you wait, the bigger a board they're going to generate. You are going to fall behind in terms of value.
Oh man, so many decision points to make here. GivePLZ is ahead on board, and it's getting more and more tense here. The idol could possibly just give him even more board presence. Just the stats on that, Bankyugi certainly can't ignore, but GivePLZ did see the Soul Mirror, so probably instead looking to build a board of this shape. Too much health, not enough attack to immediately die to Soul Mirror.
Power Infusion looking pretty tasty there for GivePLZ, which once again was given to him by Bankyugi off of the Renew.
Soul Mirror, he gets the Apotheosis off of his Samuro, and it appears that this has been patched, where the rush minion you summon off of Soul Mirror cannot in fact attack again.
Yeah, it definitely didn't used to be that way, but you know, at least it's consistent now with other effects as well, I think.
True. Okay, well, GivePLZ knows that at best for him, this is just gonna get Soul Mirrored again. Or Alexed.
Well, yeah, and there is the clear with Soul Mirror Condemn, which I don't know, you're probably looking at here for Bankyugi. I don't think realistically you're expecting to see anything much more scary than this on the other side.
So funny, this is just like the glaive-bound tennis. It's not just Alex tennis now. The stakes are higher. Big leagues.
Yep, back you go.
And same thing, Bankyugi is just a little bit less healthy, but honestly, the little difference in health is not a big deal. Oh my goodness, last 4 cards. The Cthulhu piece is in there.
It's in there.
Yeah, it's everything here listed except the Condemns, plus the last Cthulhu piece is what's left of Bankyugi's deck.
Yeah, deck
He's actually running out of removal as well. It starts to get scary depending on what you think GivePLZ has generated.
It's going to be real close. That Idol of Yashaj is going to be massive if there are any minions actually left in deck, which there are, with obviously Ilusha, Alexstrasza, Veilweaver. You got a few left to be working with. And another one is just another threat.
Giant Sethic sounds pretty scary to me if I'm Bankyugi.
Wow, really? Okay.
Okay.
Oh my god.
Oh, he still doesn't hit the thing! You can clear the Alex with Nightmare Holy Smite.
I think it's just
leave the Scorpion alone, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the problem is if you leave the Scorpion alone, then you have no chance of sticking the Cthulhu ever, right? Oh wait, sorry. The Cthulhu will kill the Scorpion. Never mind.
Well, it's the body, right? The body of Cthulhu is the annoying bit. You want to actually get that 6/6 on board if possible.
Yeah. GivePLZ just has this Shadow Word Death in hand that can check the completed Cthulhu once it comes down, as long as he doesn't immediately die. And all he has to do to not immediately die is have a minion on board.
And he heals it just to give Samuro at least a couple of turns of retirement here before it eventually just dies to the Nightmare.
Oh man, raise that is here for GivePLZ. One whiff, but the Scorpion, every Scorpion is huge.
I will say, Idol of Yashaj would pretty much have just won the game for GivePLZ at this point if he'd picked it over Shadow of Death. I am still a little perplexed by that choice.
True. Because the last piece is just build a 6/6. It does not destroy a minion. Bankyugi just straight up has no more answers. And GivePLZ should know that, given that he had taken perfect notes here. And that means the last 2 cards in Bankyugi's deck are Samuro and Body of Cthulhu.
And again, I just don't think the Cthulhu is going to get there now. It might make it so that he wins in fatigue, right? Because he'll be able to deal so much damage that only a tiny bit of fatigue is needed for GivePLZ. But GivePLZ has a good deck left. He has Alex Straza, right? He has Sethic. These are powerful cards.
Yeah, if it was just what we saw on board, maybe Bankyugi could get there, but it just doesn't work in practice. He's also just held on to Shadow or Death, so he can immediately answer the Cthulhu that comes off as the completed 4 pieces. Oh, man. All you have to do is be at 30 and have a minion on board. That's literally it.
And so Alex Straza does that pretty well. Again, you know that the last 2 cards left in the deck, well, if it's Cthulhu, it's going to delete your board, but whatever. You can then just Shadow or Death it and then heal up very happily.
Yeah. And because he knows that, I think he's just saving the Alex for that very, very niche fatigue situation you were talking about. And in the end, it's still not Cthulhu.
Oh, it's the Condemner. Yeah, the Samurai was overdrawn, wasn't it? So the deck tracker doesn't like that either, which is, I mean, even worse realistically for Bankyugi.
Yeah.
Like, he could blow it up here so that Cthulhu does a little bit more damage.
It just doesn't matter. It's all or nothing at this point. Priest has no burst whatsoever outside of the Cthulhu. So if it's not an immediate lethal, GivePLZ simply removes the Cthulhu and Bankyugi is completely out of gas.
Yeah, with
checkmate.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, if he didn't have Apotheosis in hand, maybe with the fact that he's taken so much damage, even though he's ahead on fatigue, he might just creep over the line. But Alex Straza, Apotheosis, I don't see it happening. I think the Cthulhu was just that little bit too late. It was close. And I think Bankyugi, for the most part, did a good job of trying to draw through to it. The only thing that I think we can really pinpoint this on, which you correctly pointed out, is just that second Malagos that he didn't pick. He could have ripped through his whole deck, gone for the Cthulhu a lot earlier, and if it wasn't exactly 1 in 10 Elucia, it would have worked.
It really felt like the best moment to go for it when you had as good of knowledge of GivePLZ's hand as you were ever going to get. Bankyugi didn't want to take the failure rate of 1 in 10, but it turns out there's also this failure rate of not drawing the pieces soon enough, which often feels unlikely. But if I look at the Priest list again, it's not built like a combo deck where it's either just removal, cycle, or your win condition. This is still a control Priest as a whole, and maybe trying to shoehorn it into a combo position is not the ideal way to approach every matchup, or at least you have to adjust depending on how the draws go in the mid-game.
I mean, the other thing to bear in mind is that he could hit 29 50-50s in a row here. It's unlikely, but it's possible. Make that 30, why not?
Wait, why would he give up his 1 out? Okay. Well.
Oh, I missed. Damn it.
Oh, he missed. Imagine missing here, Derek. Imagine.
Yeah. And so now, because he's not going to take any fatigue damage yet, he can go Sethic Death. He could have gone Alex Straza, Apotheosis to finish things out. This gets
just not Elucia. It's fine.
Well fought. Very well fought from Bankyugi, but his game plan, as much as he stuck to it, it was not strong enough. Maybe in playtesting, he was on average drawing the Cthulhu pieces a little bit quicker. Again, having one right at the bottom as the second to last card was pretty unlucky, and then losing the 50-50 on the Cthulhu to draw at the end, again, it was unlucky. But for many turns there, it just felt like even if he did get the Cthulhu earlier, it still wasn't going to be enough because Priest just stays so healthy in the mirror.
And even rewinding all the way back to what feels like ancient history, turn 5, I wanted to see the early Ogremaster. It just seemed good, right? Even if you are a Cthulhu deck, isn't it just better to be ahead on board and give yourself that edge in tempo advantage as well? Of course, I haven't played enough of this deck to be overly critical, but it is our job to ask questions here because there were many turns where mana was floated for Bankyugi, and in my opinion, more risks could have been taken.
Yeah, and certain consistencies did start to creep in again because he saved the insight for the entire game and then he just played Elucia and gave it to his opponent, which, you know, obviously then they have to draw a deck from his deck. He still ends up thinning a card anyway, but then why not just play it earlier and increase your chances of drawing the other Cthulhu pieces that little bit more consistently in the mid game. But overall, you know, it was. I'm glad that we saw him try this game plan and stick to it. I think it was probably better than just going for willy-nilly throwing all his threats on the board and hoping that gets there, because his deck was significantly lower value than GivePLZ. It was just in this instance, his OTK win condition was not a true OTK, and therefore it did end up in him taking the loss. And the Priest getting through is a pretty big deal for GivePLZ, because overall for Bankyugi, he didn't necessarily have a hard target on Priest, but he definitely had a soft one with Cthulhu in this deck, Cthulhu in the Warrior, and Rattlegore. It felt like he was going for at least a decent shot, especially with the Warlock as well, at trying to take down the Priest. So this is a huge loss for him.
I agree. The archetypes as a whole would generally lend themselves to being a bit anti-aggro for Bankyugi, but he clearly was completing his techs with these slower matchups in mind. He didn't want to give himself zero chance against Priest, and it so happens that these decks can beat aggro as well as Priest, because Priest these days are not running Cabal Acolyte, so Rattlegore is extremely powerful against them. You kind of need to force them to find the focused will to really have a good answer to that. But we do now move on to perhaps a quicker matchup, the first of many token druids in APAC that we could potentially be seeing this weekend, and all of them, at least the ones today, have this exact list of 15 2-ofs.
Yeah, it's definitely the one that you deviate away from. I can understand why you would. Like, Guidance has looked pretty powerful whenever we've seen it, but, you know, these are the best cards that you can put in your deck. If you want to deviate away, you have to have a pretty good reason to do so, which I'm yet to be convinced on. Whether you bring Token Druid at all, I am definitely yet to be convinced on. This week of all weeks, it's very understandable. They had to come up with 4 decks in a very short amount of time since the nerfs hit, which of course meant that Druid was just a decent deck. Everyone knew that it wasn't terrible, it wasn't the best deck, it's a 4th deck that you include in your archetype, and 50% of the players thought it slotted into their lineup well, and it's been looking okay so far this weekend. It hasn't been the dominant force that it was in previous metagames, but rocking a reasonable win rate here. I think if GivePLZ can get a fast start here against any of these control decks in the Priest, the Warlock, or even arguably the Mage, the Druid is in a fine position.
I also want to correct myself real quick. I forgot that the very first game of the day was Token Druid, where there was just the blowout double Fungal Fortune start with the Nature Study to start, and then the Glowfly as well. So I guess it says something when my brain actively tries to forget those games where you can do nothing against them, but that is just the way Token Druid is built to function. Sometimes you get draws that are absolutely unbeatable. I will say, though, that if there's any deck that can beat even the nuts from Druid, Priest has a good shot of it. And Bankyugi with this full keep shows, I think, an above-average understanding of the matchup, that it's not all about the removal. It's certainly important, but sticking a minion is so good in this matchup, so you can also take all of the value trades, and if it's Ogremancer, you can lock the Druid out completely.
Yep, Ogremancer empty board literally just ends the game. There is almost nothing that the Druid can do to answer that, because it's just so much. Like, every card in their deck is a spell apart from the Gibblings. They just lose to all the 2/2s, which again, like you said, really like the decision here from Bankyugi. How he plays it out will definitely be interesting. You would guess, apologies, that it's just going to be palm readings into coin Ogremancer unless anything crazy happens.
I definitely think that's game plan A, and I think it's very smart when the Druid is not on coin. You have, I think, in the first place, you don't pay respect to the Gibberling opener, because if they get that, you're very likely not winning anyway. And by paying respect, I mean just trying to keep double condemn in the opener, that type of thing. Most often, the Druid will start putting their threats on board turn 4. Turn 3 sometimes if you get this Lightning Bloom like GivePLZ did, though.
Yeah. Okay, Tempo Insight, I think, is fine here. At least opens up his options a little bit. And if you're going palm readings into coin Ogremancer, you probably don't have time to slot it in for a little while anyway.
Speaking of no time, GivePLZ can go for the, what is this? 6 Glowflies immediately? That seems very strong. Condemn still rank 1 here. And the double condemn is not available. kind of a nightmare for Bankyugi.
Right, so if he goes palm readings into another Condemn, he still would not have the mana to be able to get there. Holy Smite clears something at the very least.
I wonder if it's even worth playing. GivePLZ is down to 2 mana, the 1 consolation for Bankyugi next turn. I guess if it's Power of the Wild, you still would just Holy Smite one of them anyway, so might as well save the HP here. I think that's his mindset.
I was almost wondering here if you actually don't attack just because you're afraid of Zarella. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, it seems a bit over the top, but if it wasn't there, it would have been huge. Speaking of things that are huge, that Samuro, along with Zarella, was like the one way that Bankyugi stays in this game. With Condemn, Samuro, he gets the full board clear. That was crucial to find.
He needed that Zarella or the other Condemn.
Right.
I think that's pretty much it. But yeah, this is huge now. He bumps into the 3-3, coins the Condemn, and he has a fighting chance. Not just that, he has Ogremancer next turn.
Oh, yeah.
And for GivePLZ, there's just not enough board refill with this current hand. He needs Guess the Weight or another Fungal, as far as I see it.
Ooh. Psych Split, yeah.
I like it.
I like it too. I'm still kind of on the idea that actually GivePLZ should have not attacked face on that turn, because with Solar Eclipse plus Pride's Fury next turn, he just kind of wins the game if he'd gone for that. And if his board hadn't been cleared, then it doesn't matter that he's missed damage to face. I don't know.
Definitely worth thinking about. I remember I suggested something like that last weekend too in a rogue game, but maybe we were going a little bit too deep in the deck. One thing though for GivePLZ is that he has drawn Gibberling now. He has Arbor up, Solar next turn with the... it doesn't all fit right with one Innervate. It's just a little bit short. You can't fit the Gibberling in as well.
Right. And so do you just
it can
pass
still
it?
be... I think it's between Pass or Thorn Growth.
Thorn Growth I definitely don't hate the idea of.
Yeah. The thinking behind the Gibberling turn is, can I get 2 boards out of my current hand or just 1? Because ideally you want to have insurance for if they do have the other Condemn or the Zarella, I would have my next wave of threats. But no matter how I parse this hand from GivePLZ, I think it only creates 1 real board, and the other board is what, a couple 4-3s from Arbor up.
And here you kind of only have the one play of going Arbor up plus the Solar Eclipse as well to buff up the board. I think you just have to accept with another unfortunate momentary disconnect issue, which I'm sure is frustrating GivePLZ far more than it is us. If that's possible. Getting the big minions down on board, even with the skeletons in the way, it doesn't matter about face damage, it's just making a board that the priest can't answer, and that, to me, definitely felt like the best way to go about that.
Oh, but at the same time, the Ogremancer is like, if he does create that huge board, he ends up with a bunch of 5 health minions? Or, no, 4 health?
Mm-hmm.
If you do play Solar Eclipse with the Gibberling, okay, then they have pretty much infinite health. So in that case, I guess you're right that you don't care about the 2/2s. So the turn would theoretically look like, this is really hard without visuals. Gibberling, Innervate, Solar, and then...
Okay.
Arbor
Pride's
up.
Fury.
Sorry, yeah, Pride's Fury. And then you trade a bunch of 2/2s and call it a day. And if Bankyugi doesn't hit Zarella, then you're in a decent spot. So with my Mind Palace powers, if Sherlock has a Mind Palace, I have a Mind Shack. It's just terrible. Nothing is really going on here. I can't visualize it. Thank goodness we're back. And we get to see...
For the love of God, stop talking about your Mind Shack, though, Gia. I cannot handle it. I'm already tilted enough with these disconnects.
It's the opposite of a palace, Derek. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Shaq is accurate. It's just I don't know, sounds wrong. Can't even say why, just does.
Okay.
But yeah, here we go. We are in the situation where these minions cannot be dealt with, and this is getting to be a close one. This double Ogremancer is huge to prevent any kind of development from GivePLZ, but even then, he can kind of just chunk through without even needing to play spells here, right? At least some of the way.
Yes. The big deal is that the Ogre-Mancers have enough attack on them that the Treants cannot value trade unless a spell is played, which then creates 2 more taunts. And it's just this cascading disaster that's not even in Warlock.
Why would you slam double prayer there? What if you draw Zyrella? That serves... Oh, well, I guess if you're afraid of dying, like on this turn, 14, 25... What's the breakpoint? Second Arbor up hero power gives... plus 6?
How do you die if you have taunts, though? Because they have to play a spell.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I don't know about that. That seemed very weird to me.
Like 1, maybe I can understand, but yeah, again, even then, I would much rather, have saved them for a Zyrella clear.
What to do?
Oh, this is hurting my brain. I'm not going to say it. Just my mind.
I kind of think you're supposed to leave the second one up and just go Solar Arbor, right? Like, you kind of just don't care if they have it. As long as your minions are so big that they can't deal with it. I guess you can double trade and then go with Solar Arbor.
It looks like he's... Oh, if he was going to make this play, I thought it was going to be... Gibber. There was just not enough mana to get everything done. This is... Okay. Of course, certainly still a threatening board, but I see your point, where that last turn could have been this with more minions on board, but some of them have 2 damage because they ram into the 2/2s.
Right, and obviously there would still be Ogre-Mancers on board, but again, your Treants would be so big that you can just kill them off next turn anyway, before playing any spells.
Oh, but this is sick. This double Pride's Fury, that's insane. Yeah, that means the 6/4 becomes 8 attack and can value trade over the Amalgam. The rest can push face, easy 2-turn lethal setup, and Bankyugi has no good answer, especially since GivePLZ has just seen the Desperate Prayers. Even Zyrella coming down is not going to do very much. He is debating whether he can make this a gibber. Really? I thought it was not good enough. Like, the value trade looks so good.
It looks really good, yeah. I mean, you can still do that, right? With Pride's Fury and Power of the Wild?
Sure. Okay, so he would end with a full board still. And less health on his minions, but more minions. Also less immediate pushed face damage. I guess they're very, very similar in the long run. Like, the breakpoints are kind of a moot point because Zyrella is just not a thing anymore.
Yeah, and that's the real kicker, right? Like, if it's... Obviously, he would have to have got Zyrella off the top here, but there was an out, potentially, if he had saved the copies of the Desperate Prayer just to be able to try and get things rolling with Zyrella. But now, for Bankyugi, again, this strategy that he's got, it makes sense when you hear about it. I had Prancing Pony, one of the players, been helping the APAC players kind of, corral their efforts into one cohesive force, talking about how he really likes Bankyugi's strategy. And when I hear it explained out, I also like Bankyugi's strategy. I think this is an underperformance, but you have to question by how much. These decks that he's playing are, for the most part, worse versions of the expected archetypes that serve one very specific purpose that has not been realized so far in this series.
And he's already lost the 2 matchups that he quite wants to face, in my opinion. What's left now for GivePLZ is the OTK Demon Hunter, which does have the teeth to just beat control decks without even having to worry about getting on board necessarily. GivePLZ's list is very standard as far as I can see. He doesn't have those Inquisitors that we were seeing from other versions of this deck. He has Thalnos in there to help the cycle along as well.
Yeah, just super standard lists. And I think, you know, obviously the OTK Demon Hunter against Priest, disastrous matchup. As we all know, nothing really changed there, especially, I think, against Bankyugi's version that runs very few minions. So you're much more likely to find Elucia off of the Insight, or even just Acidic Swamp Oozes to destroy some of the weapons. Could be a nice bolster to the matchup for the Priest. It's the other ones where I think things start to get a lot shakier for Bankyugi, because the Mage, I think you're definitely going to be looking to struggle there if you can't get enough development off at the start or enough burst damage to win that one. And the Warlock feels disastrous, in my opinion, against the Demon Hunter. I think unless you hit the perfect ticketus, obviously, to destroy the Il'gynoth from their deck, outside of that, it's just terrible. You will die eventually.
It's grim, especially since Demon Hunter can get going even faster than before, it feels like. With Talented Arcanist, they can play around with different breakpoints that were not available when it was just Ethereal Aug Merchant before. And of course, this version from GivePLZ is still running that one Raging Fell Screamer, so you can, if you get the perfect discount, also just land the early Moarg and have the rug completely pulled out from under you if you are a control deck. So from this point, I do think it's going to have to take a miracle from Bankyugi.
We shall see, though. I think he's been, you know, I think for the most part piloting his decks well. I think like the end there with the Desperate Predators, if anything, it was just more tilt than anything else that was getting to him there and throwing them out so quickly. So if he can get his head nice and cool, he's got a very good matchup, a reasonable matchup, and then a bad matchup. So I wouldn't be surprised if he just goes with the Priest once again to try and get at least one win on the board in this series.
Gonna look difficult, but I agree, Elucia does look like his best out. Every time I see Warrior, I just wonder, is there a world where you can cosplay Justicar and get your armor high enough that you can beat the Freeze Mage? But times have changed, Derek. This is not a Freeze Mage. They can deal exponential damage from multiples of 2, not just linear damage that Freeze Mage can very easily be predictable in that sense.
Indeed. I do think we just got confirmation that the players are going to be changing to a different server, given that it did look like there was some rocky connection issues, but once we get that all set up, it should be all good to go. But again, yeah, this Demon Hunter, very standard stuff. I do think, or at the very least I should say, I would like to have seen the Illidari Inquisitor variant against Priest, because I think that could be a very different style of matchup. You have a strong backup win condition that you can use alongside just some of your damage early on, try and stick. Even just a tempo Il'gynoth potentially is the way to go if you're that afraid of Elucia. This one though, again, unless they just don't draw the Elucia, it's a pretty scary matchup overall. I think the really interesting matchup left over, with the Priest being very good, the Warlock being very good, is the Demon Hunter against the Mage, actually, where things could get a little bit back and forth in terms of dealing damage versus healing, because obviously the Demon Hunter is going to be dealing the most amount of damage when it goes for its true combo, but Mage is launching a lot of damage at the face, and it often doesn't play many minions, so Demon Hunter could struggle to actually heal up from that damage, especially as the Mask of Cthulhu often is going to deal the full 10 to the face.
That's true. In that matchup, it feels like Eldrazi Warblade suddenly becomes very important. Also, I-Beam to a certain extent, because that's a card that you don't feel awful playing on one of your own minions, but having to Fellscream blast your own board just to stay alive definitely feels suboptimal for this OTK Demon Hunter. So I think the Mage certainly has potential, and that's also just not even talking about Lunacy, which has the greatest of all potentials for sure.
Of course, yeah. If you're going to be playing that in your list, then you are looking to be in a very good spot. Taking one more look at the list from Bankyugi of the Mage, if we do eventually get to see that. It is the deck of Lunacy. It's double Ice Barrier, actually, interestingly enough, which, if anything, I would argue will work against him, because you're not afraid of taking chip damage over the course of the game. It's just one fell swoop where the damage comes through, so you would much rather, in this instance, have the double Stormwind, or Netherwind Portal, sorry, in order to get more pressure on the board. But it does at least make sense with Bankyugi's strategy. He's built his lineup to be cohesively anti-aggro, and he just unfortunately hasn't been playing many aggro matchups. The only real aggro one is the Druid, arguably, being a token deck, and it just steamrolled him.
Yeah, maybe not the luck of the draw for Bankyugi on this bracket, but I feel that with a lineup like this, you would have wanted to be facing perhaps the Paladins on the other side of the bracket, the Aggro Paladins. I think there's a couple people still playing Weapon Rogue as well. That feels, in theory, like something Bankyugi was very prepared for with double Ooze in all of his decks but the Mage, as far as I can see. Bankyugi also not having Ring Toss in his Mage, I would say, is a big deal because sometimes Counterspell can mess heavily with Demon Hunter's game plan. If you can put them on having to dump either a combo piece or a card draw piece, that can sometimes give the Mage enough time to burst them out. So definitely feels like it's an uphill battle here. I agree with you that Bankyugi's best chance for a single win against Demon Hunter is just Priest and hard mull for Lucia, take all the card draw that you possibly can. But the problem is, it's not just one win he needs, it's the full sweep, and that to me feels like a very tall order indeed.
Definitely does. But I think if nothing else here for Bankyugi, even if this strategy doesn't work out, it speaks of a great turnaround in his overall prospects in Grandmasters, because obviously he had a very good start to the season, to his position in Grandmasters, qualifying through to the World Championships. But there were definitely cracks showing, if I'm being perfectly honest, along the way. In the final moments of the season where he did qualify through, he was the biggest bundle of nerves I think I've ever seen in a competitive Hearthstone match. It felt like he couldn't, he was saying afterwards, he felt like he couldn't even move the cards. He was so nervous, which, was apparent. He played a couple of disastrous turns of Hearthstone at the end of a very, very well-played series. So his strength is there, but I think the nerves at the end were what was getting to him. But the main thing for me that I think was missing from his overall strategy was when he did get to Worlds, his lineup was, in my opinion, just the worst lineup. It didn't feel like he had found the best archetypes. It didn't feel like he had found necessarily the most cohesive strategy, because he was playing the style of decks that Bankyugi likes to play with these Highlander versions. He had Highlander Priest that at the time felt very, very unoptimized compared to the rest of the field. And even though his play for the most part was pretty good, the lineup just let him down in the end. But now he's got a stronger practice group, I think, that are rallying behind him. He's finding these cool lineup strategies. And even if it doesn't work out here, I really think that it bodes well for the future, where he is coming up with much more cohesive strategies that really pinpoint weaknesses in his opponent's lineup.
Agreed. A willingness to just play something that I would assume was, at least before, out of his comfort zone. All control decks. It's not quite the curved nature that you'd expect from Highlander decks. Speaks to an improvement in overall mindset, and I think really shows his potential for growth. So I'm super excited to see where Bankyugi takes it from here. However, I don't want to completely overshadow GivePLZ, because if we're talking about potential, GivePLZ is the new Grandmaster in this fight. It still feels like Bankyugi kind of has that challenger spirit. I just see him that way ever since his run at Worlds, and just his overall attitude of being very friendly and wanting to practice with everyone. He'd make a great anime protagonist, you know what? For GivePLZ though, he has definitely been around the block when it comes to tournament experience. He has played so many Masters Tours by this point, even all the way back to 2018 when he had his edgy username. I remember GivePLZ all too well. And he has also shown a willingness to play very, very different decks. Week one, I feel, even though we talked about how it felt like a fluke for Surrender, to be fair to GivePLZ, he didn't also get to show us his full potential, because his deck kind of just gave him the best draws in that situation. I want to see GivePLZ really impress us with a come from behind or a tough situation where he finds the line, because that is the mark of a really good Hearthstone player.
Indeed. And here we are, ready to jump in. This could be a second 3-0 sweep as the first match on stream in a row here for Bankyugi, at least to the first game he plays of the week. But it's going to have to be overcoming a bit of a tough one to get out of the gate. Obviously, we're seeing here Bankyugi full mull for Lucia, or maybe Insight. He finds the Insight, which again, he is hoping to just find Lucia from, whereas on the other side for GivePLZ, Illidari, Double Jump, and Spectral Sight, all perfectly good cards. It's just how he partitions this out when factoring outcast positioning that things get a little bit interesting.
It's the throw glaive that really makes things a bit awkward here, but with Illidari Studies and Double Jump both, you kind of have to think about when the ideal timing to play those is, because in the best case scenario, you would love to play either of them when you have the mana to immediately skull afterward, because if you don't play it that turn, it often gets stuck in the middle and can't be outcasted. But I think GivePLZ's hand is slow enough that it's fine for him to go for this type of draw. Crimson Sigil Runner looks pretty good here.
I'm trying to get tricky already. Glide doesn't really do anything, right? Even if your opponent draws a whole bunch of cards, like... I'm just trying to think of any way that you can stop your opponent from playing Elucia, and Glide potentially has some disruption properties. Probably not good enough, because you're going to discard a whole bunch of your own cards, most likely.
Maneuvering Glide to actually get you net positive in terms of cards in hand is really tough as Demon Hunter, because you have to play out a bunch of stuff. But oh my goodness, GivePLZ is a gamer.
Most certainly
I'm already so curious about where this is going to take him, but I'm happy this is happening right after I said I wanted to see something unusual from GivePLZ, something different from the straightforward game plan of last weekend.
Well, Zyrella is a minion from the deck, which is good, because now Insight, again, more likely to find that Elucia later on.
Yes.
Played Proto Drake over the Hothead. I was kind of just looking at Hothead because it's cheap and you can throw it down at the start alongside the Mage Scribe. But at the end of the day, it's a very sticky minion if it does get to turn 8.
Sure thing. Mage Scribe itself, very healthy. Bankyugi is just going to proc the Spell Burst immediately here. While it is low odds that the Mage Scribe dies, I don't mind this because Zyrella has very few targets in this deck. Like, if Demon Hunter is playing minions on board, it's because they're fine throwing them away.
So there is a target for you to throw your Throwglaives on at least, which opens up the Spectral Sight. But you have to wonder again now, at this point in the game, how is the Glide factoring in? Like, obviously you can just say at this point, I don't really like that pick. Maybe I had something in mind, but it hasn't worked out, and just ignore it. But obviously, if you want it to be good, you kind of want to get rid of cards in hand, not get more of them.
So in the end, the Throwglaive is just thrown out of the hand to keep cycling with the Spectral Sight. And I think that is the way to go. The Skull comes one turn too early. Very awkward now for GivePLZ to get that in an outcast position. Yikes.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just impossible, right? With Glide in the way, you're going to have to play that first, which obviously resets everything anyway. And Ogre Mancer off the top. Perfect card for Bankyugi to find. Imagine saying he'd need a Elucia. This is just Tempo Priest. And he doesn't even run any minions.
True. Oh, man.
Ooh, to be fair.
One thing GivePLZ has going for him, I would say, is time. Priest, while Bankyugi has gotten on board, it takes a long time for him to actually put together lethal. So GivePLZ's natural card draw is also not something to be underestimated, because with the Il'gynoth, Moarg, and Ethereal in hand, he's technically Fell Scream Blast and mana away from an OTK. Very optimistic thinking, though. He has to deal with the Ogre Mancer eventually, and it does appear that this is the turn.
Yeah, this is kind of awkward because he had quite a few pieces of the combo, and he's just used 3 of them on this turn with the Moarg, I-Beam, and the Orc Merchant, but he's clearly setting up for a Glide on the following turn. And things now got really interesting because Bankyugi just got Elucia, to which he is thinking, right, I've won the game. And usually, absolutely, you're correct. But I think it's just going to end up back in the deck next turn.
Oh, this is so funny. And when I have ever considered Glide in this deck, I usually only pick it when I can maneuver it to actually draw me more cards. So you'd have to start with less than 4. But given that the only way to do that is to play an essential combo piece or skull, I think GivePLZ does just Glide here. You use it as kind of... what's the name of that card in Warlock? Plot Twist? That's basically all it is here. Yeah.
Sure thing. Yeah,
and
that's...
the illusion as well.
He could just draw it again straight away. He gets the same amount of cards. But, oh no, wait, he gets 4 left, sorry, as well. So it's pretty disastrous to lower his hand size. But he got the Insight back, the Corrupted one at the very least, so he could just rip it straight out the deck.
This is so weird. I've just never taken Glide and used it like that, where I had a skull in hand. But GivePLZ, he just knew. He knew Lucia was in hand.
That was some spidey senses right there. He just knew 100%. You can say what you like that he got lucky. GivePLZ knows.
He just knows. Oh, and he gets a double jump with 6 mana. He interrupts the skull. GivePLZ is a genius.
That glide was insane.
I don't want to say it won him the game because he obviously hasn't hit the full combo yet and Bankyugi still has time to find a Lucia. But if he does win the game, it was off the back of that glide. 100%.
I'm saying it. That was a just absolute insta win. That was so sick.
It was an insta lose if it wasn't glide. But it doesn't mean that it's an instant win for GivePLZ just because it was glide. This Blade Master is pretty problematic for GivePLZ at the moment. He can make it so that the Spectral Sight gets an outcast position, but this is his second I-Beam, I believe. And that means that the Fellscream Blast is going to have to be the way to deal the combo. Again, there's more redundancy in OTK Demon Hunter compared to before because you now have the talented Arcanist, not just the Ethereal Aug Merchant, but oh my gosh, the gang's all together, Derek, it's happening!
So with +3 spell damage with the talented Arcanist, you can then start to piece together actually quite a lot, even with just one Moog.
Yes, so that would be 6 on each minion you hit, so 18.
Oh,
sorry, it's
no,
7?
it'd be...
no, wait, 8. God.
So you're dealing 4 with each Il'gynoth, which means it's 12 to 24, I think, that you are dealing with the full combo.
Right. 8, yeah, 8 on each minion, my bad.
Yeah.
Arcanist gives you +2 on the first spell that you play that turn. However, he only needs one spell. That is the Fellscream Blast that's currently in hand. And then, even though this is a Battlecry effect, the Aug Merchant is an aura effect, and it will essentially just stack as +3 spell damage, considering it's only one spell to be played. So if we're not wrong, this is just...
That's it.
And he also just hit the other Moarg, so it's Giga Lethal.
Oh my god.
Glide!
That was unbelievable. He has mana, right? That all works out. He has more than enough. He has like 1 trillion damage here.
He does.
Bankyugi knows what's up. Oh, he throws it down. That was insane. I mean, well played, GivePLZ. I think in the end I would have looked at Glide, I would have been tempted by it, and I would have picked anything else at the end there because I wouldn't have thought that it actually ever gets played. He maneuvered his hand to the point where it got there. He obviously won't know until he watches the VOD back that he discarded exactly a Lucia the turn it was drawn from Bankyugi. But after what was one of the coolest strategies that we saw this weekend, Bankyugi with the Control Warrior, the Control Warlock, the Cthulhu Priest, the Spell Mage as well, full anti-aggro, kind of going anti-priest as well, just got absolutely taken apart. It was a good idea, but in practice, just didn't even look close.
Fell short in practice, maybe reached a little bit too far with the deck list. I don't really know what it is because it felt like he is still running 2 of all the important cards. Maybe decision making, and the Priest Mirror was one. And even though this is definitely a very flashy way to go out, it feels bad for Bankyugi to lose the Lucia to an impossibly well-timed Glide. I still don't know how GivePLZ can be such a mad genius, but in the end, to be